Brought to you from historic Studio L, it's the ECHORIFT Show, your pop culture lightning rod. Each episode we bring you the best in comics, movies, television, books, fast food, and anything else our producer can think of. I'm Don, co-creator, writer, and colorist for ECHORIFT Comics.
And I'm Seth, and I have nothing to do with ECHORIFT Comics other than the fact that I read them.
But you are the host of a show, at least one show.
Ancillary Characters podcast.
Actually, you're the host of two shows because you have Pod Pie too, right?
We haven't recorded an episode of Pod Pie in, I think it's over a year, but we keep saying we need to.
Multi-podcast producer is what you say, and you just don't get into the details. And then you're also a blogger. You're a Bigfoot researcher, I think is the best way to put it.
Sure.
And what blog is that?
sasswhat.blogspot.com.
Excellent. So Mike is still gone. Mike and Hans are off doing their walkabout or dream quest or whatever the heck it is, and Seth has agreed to come in and help out. And I'm not actually hunting for a permanent replacement for Mike because I have faith. I have faith that those two clowns will figure out what's going on, and Mike will knock it into Hans's head to come back. But until then, me talking to myself is just not as much fun, as much as I like hearing my own voice, as talking to other people. And it's another opportunity, or it's a great opportunity to have Seth on.
I will say, just going by Hans' Instagram feed, I'm not 100% sure you're going to be getting Mike or Hans back ever.
Don't you think? I'm half wondering if it's going to end in death of one of them.
I mean, if it does, we'll know through the Vine videos. It'll be like a Vine of them driving a car off a cliff like Thelma and Louise.
Holding hands above their heads. Either that and then the question then will be, whose Vine will it be? Now, will it be the victim's Vine? Like, will you see like the 10 seconds or whatever, and then you just see like it falls backward and falls flat?
It could just be like an eyewitness. I mean,
yeah, that's a good point.
Some sort of crowd gathered.
Hashtag still kicking.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, either that or whoever does the killing will be so enraged and insane at that point that they will be looking for the attention to film the final moments of his opponent.
We'll just hear Hans gentle weeping sailing through the air.
You just hear the sound of the power frame snapping.
Yeah.
And that's just the end. It's like the dial tone. So this time we're going to get together and we're going to talk about digital comics. And Seth and I both went, I did an experiment. And what's kind of funny is I did this experiment on my own, and I now can call it an experiment. It wasn't an experiment when I did it. I thought it was the way I was going to do things. And I know for a fact that Seth has, in the past year, or maybe it's been longer than that, gone from being a print to digital customer, right?
Yeah, it's 2 years ago. 2 years ago as of early March.
And what was the driver in your situation?
The comic book store that I was going to, we had a fairly intense altercation between me and the comic shop owner and an employee over a ridiculous way they were treating my fiance at the time, my now wife.
Oh, so it was one of those like, a girl walked into the comic book store situations?
Yeah, they had always treated her very awkwardly, kind of like, oh, you read comics? Well, you better hold on to her kind of thing, like every time I was in there. And but they got mad at her because she tried to buy one comic with a credit card, and they basically told her they would not allow it, which, I get. I know that there's fees and stuff associated with that and taxes that make it difficult to just allow like a $3 purchase, but it was the way in which this guy handled her that really sent me over the edge. And I ended up going back into the store because she didn't tell me it had happened because I was on another aisle when it happened. I ended up going back into the store and literally getting in a shouting match with the owner and the other guy, because, I mean, they weren't about to say they had done anything wrong.
Right.
It was all my fault, and I had an attitude. And
It's funny. That's something that we've talked about doing a comic tango on, is the level of responsibility that a customer has to the small business concept. Because I know there's a lot of this, and again, not to have that show in advance, but the idea of there's a lot of pushing and shoving about, support creators and support your local comic book store. And is there a point where that goes too far? Is there a point where somebody hasn't earned it? And
Yes.
it sounds like the store you were dealing with didn't really deserve to have any extra rope.
Yeah, I'm a small business guy. I do freelance work for local newspapers, and for 2 years I ran a column that was solely devoted to promoting and helping local small businesses.
Okay.
So and I grew up. My parents owned a bookstore, so I know what it's like, and I have there's a lot of leeway when I'm dealing with any independent business because I know what it's like and I know how hard it is. And I don't know what there's a separation in the way comic book stores typically deal with customers and the way your average cafe or bookstore deals with customers. I don't know where the separation comes, but there's an attitude difference in a lot of those stores. I'm not saying all of them because I have dealt with a lot of really cool stores too. So
Yeah, and I think it's that not we. I mean, the best the best comparison I can think of is there are record stores like that, and I've dealt with the same thing. The record store I went to get all my cool industrial and punk albums growing up was near Villanova University, and they had some of that. Like if you came in and they would not. I don't know. They were just better than you, and that wasn't gendery or anything. It was just like you're in or you're out.
It's the high fidelity thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly
Jack
that.
Black and High Fidelity.
Yeah, but they were the only place that carried the cool records.
Yeah.
Although the irony was the alternative was there was a Tower Records, and anybody who's familiar with Philadelphia knows South Street's the cool art indie part of the city, and it's the closest thing we had to, I guess, at Greenwich Village. And there was a huge Tower Records that sold it, and big business. And I always used to laugh because this company would. And I didn't have a problem because I guess I had the Doc Martens and I had the right look. But it was amazing how they were probably just chasing people off to this big company that would just easily put them out of business.
Sure.
I don't deal with any of that. My comic book store is amazing. It doesn't have any of the. It certainly doesn't have any of the gender stuff because a woman is co-owner of the store, and it has female employees. But also it's just a very bright, and it's just the people who own that store, Sarah and Titus. They're really forward thinking, and they're growing their store. They just bought the store next door so that they could expand and have an area for conventions and events and things. And it's very brightly lit, and it's not creepy. And they even seem, I don't know if it's a deliberate decision, but they seem to have a lot less cheesecake on the walls, and nothing gets old. I mean, you walk into those comic book stores and they still have a faded Spawn #1 poster in the front window. And I'm not really exaggerating. Like, I think there's a store near me that's like that, and it's sort of alienating. So I never had any reason not to want to do anything, and I never ever stopped going to my store every Wednesday. It's a ritual. The guys at work and I go every Wednesday at lunch. But I got to a point where I was tired of all this paper, and I was reading I had become. Basically, the Marvel digital codes did it to me. I was realizing that my wife was pregnant, and then after the baby was born, again, there's a lot of quiet time. The only chance I was getting to read my comics was on my iPad in the dark. And at the time, I rejected guided view, so it wasn't as though I was getting anything out of it. I always read things full screen. But I got to a point where I thought, you know what, this is just, I love going to the comic book store. I'm going to still buy comics, but I'm just going to go digital. I just don't want this paper. I don't want this clutter. I don't want this stuff. And that's what I did. I culled my pull list down so that it was only the books that the kids and I either jointly read, like at the time it was All New X-Men and Superior Spider-Man and Nova, and then the comics that they bought, which was like Hero Bear, and there's a Sonic comic and a Mega Man comic. So I went through this, and I realized that when I went all digital, for Christmas, because I did it at the beginning of this year. For Christmas, I asked everyone for iTunes gift cards, and I got all these iTunes gift cards, and that was what I was going to buy my comics with, and it was all set. And we get iTunes discards at a discount, because if Target puts them on sale, and then you get an additional 5% off if you have a Target credit card. So we would end up getting $100 cards for $80 or something, $85. So that was my pull list discount. I mean, I had it all worked out. And I stopped reading comics. The habit went away because I think I don't know why, and that's sort of why I wanted to talk about it, because I want to know what your experiences are 2 years later. When something is released stops mattering a lot in digital because the store's always there. And I'm sort of cheap. I guess that's another part of me. So I look at it and I say, well, there's a new issue of Thor out. But you know what? I'm not going to read that. So why buy that? I'm going to wait until I'm going to read it. And then I don't buy it. And then another issue of Thor comes out. And I think, well, at this point, I'll just wait and buy all of them at one time. And over time, I wasn't reading comics. And it sort of snapped, and I said, you know what? I don't mind having the stuff. I can eBay it. I'll do something with it. And about a month ago, I went back to buying all my comics in print, and I am very much in love and engrossed in my comics again. And it makes me feel like digital's not an all or nothing thing for me.
Yeah, the impetus for going entirely digital was that event, but I had gone digital on all my Marvel comics before that. I had gone all digital on my DC comics. That's what it was. I still enjoyed buying the Marvel comics in print because you got the physical copy and the digital code.
Yeah, you're still digital anyway.
Yeah, so and I've always been a fan of bagging and boarding comics. I love to wait until I have stacks and stacks, and then I make an afternoon of it, and I sit and I watch. I put something on the TV, and I sit down and I do that, and I'll even sort them out and all that. And it was always a part of the allure of it to me was having this. It's not just reading; it's a hobby and it's a collection, and you're building this collection and everything. But when that thing with the store happened and I went entirely digital, I never really realized until maybe a year later that I did miss some of the experience of print comics. I missed going into a store, at least a store where you can have a good experience, and going through those back issue bins and seeking out some comic, from years ago, or even just looking through new stuff and physically being able to touch new comics that you might not otherwise look at and pick them up and flip through them. I don't think I'm entirely like you in that you quit reading. It seems like you quit reading probably because you went digital. I actually think what happened with me is because I went digital, I started trying more comics because I had the iPad and I have this iPad store there in front of me, and I'm able to just click that button and I don't even think about the $3 I'm spending on that issue. So I ended up going too far overboard. I was buying way too much, and I think eventually I burnt myself out because I was buying so much stuff, and it was becoming hard to keep up with everything, and just keeping up monthly on all these different series I was trying. And there is an ease connected with that store on the iPad. And I guess this is where we could get into the...
Yeah, there was an ease.
Where the Comixology store on the iPad app was so easy for me to just click that open, and I might not have even intended on buying anything. I might have been opening that app just to read. And I'm like, as long as I'm in here, I should look for the issue that came before this. Or, oh yeah, this is a book by Jeff Johns. I had wanted to see if they had the digital copy of something else. I'm going to flip over there real quick and look for that.
Yeah, and that is definitely a part of it, and that is something I did experience. But like I said, I would get cheap about it, and it's funny because I just got done talking about the gift certificates. You'd think I'd be less cheap because it's free money. But I always felt like there was another sale around the corner or something, and that I would stock up. And I never did. Like, I shouldn't say never did. Like, at one point, I had bought Black Science #1, and then I let it lapse. And that was, I guess maybe that came out in November or December, and I knew that I was going to do this digital thing. And so I didn't buy the follow-up issues. And there was an afternoon I recall reading all of those. And I remember you gave me Manifest Destiny, and it was a couple of issues you gave me, but there were a few others that were there. And I sat down and read those and then bought the one or two that had come out since or that weren't part of what you had gifted me. And I enjoyed that. And there were a couple other things, but I really just ended up reading just my Marvel comics and nothing else. And I've gone, which is a completely separate issue, I've gone entirely trade with Image Comics because other than Manifest Destiny, because is there any other? I think it's just and I really like Southern Bastards right now, but again, a point could come when I just decide to trade that. But that's a different issue. It's because Image is just deluging me with titles, and I can't keep track of them, and I really don't want to store those. Like I'll just deal with my East to Wests and my Manhattan projects and trade. Mm-hmm. But I was never reading any DC Comics, period, when I was buying print, because I had gotten so used to the convenience of that digital code that I just wasn't going to buy. And I wasn't that big a fan of DC Comics to begin with, but I know, because I'm reading a few now, I know that I could have been reading them and I would have been interested in them. Like I went through a period where I was buying Batman and Robin. I think Peter Tomasi was the writer. I don't know if he still is. It was when Damian was still alive.
Yeah, he is.
But I liked that, and I read that like 6 or 7 issues of it, and then again I dumped it because I was like, oh, I'm going digital. But I wasn't. I was buying like Trillium, and they would just pile up, and I'd have this pile of comics that don't have digital codes that I'll read someday. And I don't know. I feel like I was not, because I wasn't buying them in digital either, and that was the weird thing. So again, like I feel like, and I am I believe in I tend to have a very black and white personality. You are all or none, and I'll be quick to criticize someone else for being that way, but I realize I'm that way myself. And I think maybe my attitude was, well, you go all digital or you do all print, and there's no middle ground. And I think now the way I feel about it is, I'm digital for sales. Like I love sales. I love reading the comics that I don't have to pay for digitally, like the Marvel comics. I enjoy that. I tend not to crack them out. I put them in the bags right away because I have kids. They'll get destroyed. Mm-hmm. I'll read those, but I'm just I don't know. I enjoy coming home with a pile of comics like I used to. And
see, like when I was still going to that shop and I could get my Marvel comics in print, and I'd get that code, and I was buying the DC stuff digitally. I liked that setup. I actually enjoyed having, I can read these Marvel comics in print. I can read my DC comics on the iPad. It's 2 different experiences. I still get the experience of going to the comic shop and looking through books. If there was a comic book store near where I live now that I thought was a cool place, I got along with the owners, didn't have any weird experiences with my wife and the owners, I would probably go back to that because I enjoyed being able to buy print comics. I do like the ease of digital, but again, to go back to the iPad store, that iPad store was a big deal for me in that it improved my chances of impulse buying. I mean, the odds of me impulse buying stuff through that store were way higher than they are with me pulling up the Comixology website through Safari and going on there. And I don't know how to explain that, and I know it sounds
you're
silly.
adding clicks.
Yeah.
It's not as easy. All you have to do is type a password and then you're done. And now you have to add to cart, and then you have to check out, and basically every step of the way is something to make you second guess your decision. And it's unfortunate. I'm sure that they'll fix it, and I'm not hating on Comixology. They're the ones who sell ECHORIFT comics. They sell Hurry, but I really, like, if I made the decision to go back to print just before that announcement and just before that change. But that's a big deal breaker for me. Now, I was glad to see, because I think I still had $20 or $30 in iTunes gift cards, and I don't buy that much music or movies. So it was really just for comics. And I was glad to see the Marvel app, and the individual apps you can still buy from. I think Marvel, Image, DC, but at the same time, only Marvel is tied to your Comixology app. So I went to go buy some Image comics digital, and I just backed off because I was like, "Whoa, I don't want to have I don't like all these icons." Like, and that's me, but I don't feel like it goes back to the whole point of Apple inventing the iPad and inventing the iPhones and inventing the App Store was simplicity. Mm-hmm. And now I look at it and I'm thinking, if I've got to break out a credit card and I can't use this gift card, I may as well go buy those PDFs off of the Images website, which means I'm not going to buy anything because I'll just go buy the print comic. I mean, that's all there is to it. But every now and then I'll get into something, and my comic book store is pretty large. And typically, like say for a big 2 book, if you go up there and say issue 4 is on the shelf, you'll probably find 1, 2, and 3 still sitting there.
Yeah.
Or if it's issue 12, you'll see back to maybe issue 9. But every now and then and that's one of the things I like digital for too. Like I did Superman Wonder Woman for the ECHORIFT show. I bought the first 4 issues digital, or whatever we did. Maybe it was 5 issues, and I think now it's on issue 7 or 8. And I was able to pick up the 2 most recent issues, but there was a little gap there where they didn't have any of the copies. And I went ahead and bought those digital. And that just seems to be, now there's a part of my mental patient brain that's annoyed that I have that gap in the run. But at least it does fill a need that way.
Yeah. You were talking about how you're cheap. I'm the same way with DC now, where I will wait to, like Batman Eternal.
Yeah.
I'm waiting until those issues drop to $1.99.
Well, I was gonna say, or until you win the lottery, because
Yeah.
at $2.99, they're more than $2.99, aren't they?
No, I think they're $2.99.
Okay.
If they were more than that, there isn't a chance in heck I'd ever buy them. But
whatever happened to DC dropping the price after a month? It's a lot longer than a month now.
I think it's 6 weeks now, but it might be further out than that. I started noticing that with Superman Unchained, because when Superman Unchained came along, I didn't like it enough to buy it at $3.99 or whatever it was. And when I went to pick up the issues when normally they would have dropped to $2.99 or $1.99, I noticed they were still that price, and I've never bought any issue past issue number 2.
You and everybody else.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
I don't
Well,
know
no, but there's a good example. When I first went digital, Green Arrow, and I was like, you know what, this Jeff Lemire guy, I like his work. And I think he had been writing it was a while. Like maybe there was 7 or 8 issues out that he had written at that point. And the first 2 or 3 that he wrote, I was able to pick up at $1.99. But I'm telling you, it wasn't just the current and the previous. It was like 3 issues. They were still at $2.99, and that really that's when I noticed. I was like, man, are they waiting 3 months now? Are they waiting a quarter? But and then I just stopped reading it because I just did, and I didn't have a pull list, and that's something that the app probably you could do those. That's with the irony. They had those subscriptions that they came out with, but you couldn't do them through the iPad app. You had to do them with your credit card out on their website. And I don't like doing recurring payments on my credit card because credit cards change, and I don't know how many times. Or actually, part of it is that I don't have a credit card. I use an ATM card for everything, and I know you get the credit card protection, but when you have a recurring bill and all of a sudden, I agreed to do Walking Dead in some pull list and I stopped reading it, but I don't, all of a sudden I can put that back on the shelf or make a deal with the people at the comic book store to leave it in my bin for another week. I turn around and all of a sudden $12 is missing out of my bank account. On the wrong week, that can be very frustrating.
Yep.
And that's why I didn't do that. I wanted to do it with the gift cards, but you couldn't do it through the app.
So when it comes to print, what do you have a preference between the two? Like if I were to say, what is your preferable way of consuming comics? Is it digital or print?
It's print trades.
Okay.
I still don't have that great of fondness for floppies. Right now, I think that's because we're in a time when there isn't a comic coming out that I need to read that day. There was a point when I was like that with Superior. They put out a Superior Spider-Man, and I would read it at like lunch, or I would read it like that night, and all new X-Men. And I still really like. I mean, I think all Amazing. I haven't been to the store in 2 weeks, but I know maybe Amazing number 2 is out. But Amazing Spider-Man might get that way. All new X-Men I still love, and Guardians of the Galaxy I still love, but I don't. I can let them stack up a little bit. I'll wait till the weekend to read those kind of thing. But more than anything, for almost any of the comics I'm reading, like Uncanny Avengers, I could not follow that week to week to save my life, and I just read the whole run of it, and I loved it. But that is my preferred way to read comics.
See, I don't even know if I could, like, between, if you're saying like single issues, I don't know if I have a preference between digital or print, but I do absolutely adore reading comics in a hardcover, especially if it's oversized.
Hardcover, though? I mean, hardcovers are the hardest reading experience, though. They're the nicest product, but they're not the easiest to read.
That's the way my wife always says that. She hates my giant omnibus, DC omnibus, and I understand, like, in terms of convenience, it's not ideal, but I'm talking like if I want to pull out an Absolute edition and really like marvel at the artwork and get into that story.
Yeah.
That's my preferred way of reading it.
No, I mean that there's something to be said for that. I don't know. I find most of the hardcovers I have, they don't lay right, they don't lay flat. But when it comes to what you're describing, which is really just appreciating the artwork and being in awe of what they accomplished, there probably isn't, particularly those extra large ones that are almost the 11 by 17 size that the artwork was originally drawn in. They are really nice. I think that I would almost want a backup paperback to turn to. In fact, what was I thinking of recently that I have? Oh, it was Fear Agent. And I love those giant omnibuses, and I'm real proud of having it back there on my shelf, and I love looking through the pages and looking at the artwork. But I think now that they're coming out in trade again, and I've actually seen them in dollar bins or cheapy bins at cons and stuff. I think I'd rather also have the individual issues so that I could do that. But that's an example of, I would love to have a digital reading copy, but Dark Horse is so garbage with their with their stuff that I just don't. I'm not going to bother with that. I do not want anything to do with that app. I redeemed that free Star Wars #1 code, and I'm never going back.
I will say my favorite current. You were talking about trades. Have you looked at any of the new Marvel Now hardcovers?
I don't think so.
They're not the oversized hardcovers. They're basically trade paperback sized hardcover. I bought the first two Mark Waid Incredible Hulk hardcovers while I was on vacation, and I loved that format. There's no dust jacket.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually printed right on the hardcover. I really liked it.
Yeah, that's the way they do their OGNs and the season ones.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I really like. In fact, it's not the case with the one original graphic novel I bought, the Avengers: Endless Wartime. It had sort of actually a little bit of a cheesy storybook gloss to it.
I just bought it.
The other ones I see have that matte finish that has like a nice texture to it.
It's a little. The difference is too, though, that the Avengers one I think is still a little oversized compared to the
Yeah, it is a little bit bigger, but the only thing, see, I'm with Marvel on the hardcovers. I'm just irritated at the cost. It's fewer pages and $5 more, and
go to Books A Million.
I was just gonna say,
I bought that Avengers: Endless Wartime for $7 on clearance.
Yikes, that's a really good price.
I could have gone crazy. We were on vacation last year when we went on our honeymoon. We went to a Books A Million in Tennessee, and I spent $150 and left with 4 bags full of clearance graphic novels. And this year I decided, like, we're walking into the store, and I made a conscious decision. I'm not going to do that.
I would have to go even further. I would have to just take the 220s with me into the store and leave everything locked in the car, because it is so. There's a new place. We don't have Books A Million around here that I'm aware of, but there's this new place. It's a chain called Second and Charles, and they buy books, and they have a huge comic and graphic novel section. And I picked up the first 3 volumes of Sweet Tooth for $6 each, and they were all in really good condition. And so they're used, quote unquote, but a lot of them I don't think ever were read. I think they're getting overstock from stores and things like that.
Yeah.
And I did the same sort of thing. Their selection could be a little better, but from what I understand, because it's a used-ish bookstore. Imagine a used bookstore that's like Target, run by Target, so it's super high, clean and professional, and it's of course that means it doesn't have the character of the little mystery bookstore, but I really like the place, and they also do video games and movies and books and you name it, but nothing that good. I've never seen that for $6. That's a great deal.
It was crazy. I will say, while we were on that vacation, we went to a comic book store, and I bought 2 print floppy single issues, Sinestro #1 and Original Sin #2, and that was my first time to buy single issues of comics in 2 years, and I really enjoyed it.
And you said you don't have any comic stores near you. You couldn't switch back.
To where we moved to, no, there's nothing around where we are now.
Because that's one thing I will say. If I was stuck, like a lot of people are, unfortunately, don't have a choice, I would do digital probably over something like DCBS. That delay would get on my nerves. And maybe it would. Maybe I get used to it, but that would get on my nerves after a while.
The mail order thing, that's not an avenue I'll go down.
Yeah, I don't see the point. And the discounts can't be that good to be worth all that. But I know that there are listeners to this show that swear by it, and good for them. I just don't think it's something for me. Because the second time I got out of comics, it was because I went subscription with everything, and then when the subscription ran out, I was done. I really think for me as a fan, I guess to close out the show, I need the routine of going to the comic book store. I enjoy the social aspect. I enjoy browsing. And that's something that I'm not going to tell you, oh, the smell of the paper. Get out of here with that. I don't care about that. The smell of the manure before I bought my car, like that doesn't play with me. But I really like the routine and the social aspect of getting up out of your house. And I kind of think it's good to want things sometimes. I like the anticipation. I can't just have it right away. I don't know. All right, that's our show. Thanks again, Seth, for coming in and helping me deal with this current situation with Mike and Hans. It was fantastic having you on the show. I'm glad we finally did it. We will absolutely, positively have the blockbuster Bigfoot episode, but I've got to get Mike back for that because we've got to have the entire gang present to make that happen.
Yeah.
All right, my name is Don. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Don_Garvey.
And you can find me on Twitter at SethBreedsLove.
Check out ECHORIFT.com. You can see previous episodes of this show, Comic Tango, our other show about comics, and the Kids on Comics show, which should be being released a little more frequently now that summer's coming. Seth, tell our listeners where they can find your shows and blogs and all that good stuff.
AncillaryCharacters.com. You can find us on iTunes and or your favorite podcatcher. We're also on Twitter at Ancillary Tweets. You can find my Bigfoot blog, saswhat.blogspot.com.
All right, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and that's our show. Any final words, Seth?
Good luck to Mike and Hans, wherever they are.
God bless. We got to say a prayer for them. I hope they survive and get back to me.
This has been an ECHORIFT production. Go to ECHORIFT.com to learn more.